Okay, great. Thanks for everyone to join us today to understand more about why and when decision agility matters. From two panel experts, we have Oresh and Max today. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Gully. I'm the VP of Customer Success. I'm online here on a chat with you in case that you have any questions. You can let me know. We started it, we just introduced FlexRule as a company. FlexRule is the leading decisioning company that combines decision intelligence and decision management in an open, unified, and simple platform. It enables organizations to make optimized customer-centric and situation-level business decision in changing environment using decision-centric approach, which I'm pretty sure that Arash is going to explain a little bit more about that. Let's do the quick introduction of Arash and Max today. Max is the BPM expert, principal consultant, specializing in business and process architecture, business capabilities, business process improvements, risk and compliance management, and so on. And Arash is the creator of decision-centric approach, which is the methodology that brings people, rules, data, and process together to make business decisions that first-class citizen of enterprise organization. What we are doing today, to set the context, we are presenting a couple of slides, and then we will jump in to the conversation between Max and Arash. It's going to be awesome conversation. Arash, the stage is yours. I can see your slides.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah, awesome.
So before going through the formal definition of business agility and all of those fun stuff, let's set up the context, make sure everyone knows where we are going and why we're having this kind of conversation today. So essentially, any organizations, particularly financial organizations, financial services, banking, mortgage provider, and nonprofit organizations, essentially running operation in a regulated environment. And when we are talking about the sources of the change, generally everyone thinks our regulation changes, policy changes, and all of that. We don't say they don't change. They actually is a big sources of all of the changes the companies need to adapt to. However, based on your organization, there are many other areas that forces the change to the organizations. And when we're talking about the sources of the change, we're talking about internal sources and external sources. Now, if you look at, for example, financial services, which is banking, mortgage providers, sits under that bigger umbrella, what you're gonna see is there are some other sources of the change. It's not always about regulations and policies. For instance, let's say a mortgage provider, i.e., bank or private financial service organization, have many customers from the individual that they have like credit line with them, or from, for example, government agencies or more enterprise businesses that they get loan and line of credit and they have credit contracts with them. One of the challenges of these type of organizations is not only looking at the regulation and find out what changes they need to do, they actually need to proactively monitor for many different sources of those changes. For example, if you have a loan with some provider, a mortgage provider, and your financial situation changes along the line of along the life cycle of engagement of you with that organization, they need to be notifying with the events or signals that they gather from the market about you that your financial situation has changed. For example, it's easy for them to see if you, for example, didn't pay for a settlement of the month, and if that's repeating, therefore that raises a flag. But if your spending is not always with them and it's in some other form and way in some other market, they need to still be aware of that. So all of the activities financial you do as individual or organizations need to be monitored and captured, and then that may or may not necessarily raise a flag to the provider of that line of credit contract with you to reassess you, reevaluate you, make sure that you can technically pay that off. And then that might trigger the rating risk to organizations. Another instance, for example, let's say a enterprise organization have a big line of credit with some provider, and as the collateral of a secure loan, for instance, they have a building to support that loan, and things change and the building might be damaged or an earthquake happens, so that collateral status changes. Therefore, they need to make sure these changes are sending signal to them as an organizations and they capture them. For example, let's say in the board of director, one of the directors that are a very important person in running the business dies, unfortunately. That changes the legal structure of organizations. So the reason I share this is because when we're talking about the change, everyone is like focused purely on regulation and policies and all of those things that are related to regulatory and law, but there are many other sources of the change organizations need to capture and monitor and reassess and reevaluate all the individuals and companies that they have the credit contract with them. Now, this is a very difficult task to do because those changes have different implication and impact in different parts of organizations across product development, the services they provide, the regulation they support, the demand that they need to provide the products and services to, and ensuring that they capture all of this from the landscape is essentially pushing the change through different levels of organizations from different functions, different groups, and individual people that they do day-to-day job in that organizations. Now, with having that as a context, let's have a look at the definition of decision agility. Now, when a source of change an event happens and the source that and then the organization captures that event based on one of those sources of the change, they essentially need to do their business in different way. You cannot go ahead and do the same thing, but the collateral is damaged or the person couldn't do the settlement, right? Now, this change of work and the change that they need to do in terms of running the business, running the operation, is essentially has to be very agile. And by agile, I mean they need to be proactively, not reactively, respond to those changes based on the external and internal sources of the change in a timely manner. And the way we like to define decision agility is the ability of organizations to respond to those changes raising from internal and external sources in the timely manner, but ensuring what is more important than their timely manner also is the fact that they need to make sure those respond to those changes, they are effective and efficient, meaning they know exactly where to change, they need to do the right change, and also the outcome of those changes has to be accurate, transparent, and consistent. Now, that's the context and definition for decision agility. Max, back to you. Tell me your experience. Tell me you where you agree and disagree about the context, background of sources of the change and decision agility.
Thank you, Arash. I think you have done a very good introduction about decision agility. Yes, I think with all the changes happening, everyone is trying to keep up to date with all the changes. And it's good to see that a lot of organizations in a lot of IT projects have started focusing on trying to understand the business process or doing business process mapping. It has been taken many years since I joined the industry, and to get IT project to understand the importance of having a good understanding of the business processes, that is definitely critical. And that is mapping out the business processes, especially using BPMN. So there is a lot of work doing there. So now let's step back and look at what is the common things that is happening. So usually, so the business process are mapped up using BPMN as a business process in many IT projects. Majority of these are focused on trying to get to the bottom line of having the business requirements and helping defining the functional requirements for the system configuration or system development for either in enterprise system like CRM, ERP, or other type of systems, or at times it could be even building from scratch, doing hard coding, or building the applications on some sort of low-coded platform. So that is all good. Having to have that business process model mapped in BPMN, having a good understanding of the process. So another purpose, apart from capturing all these business requirements, the business process models or the business process themselves being captured is a way to try to standardize all the different ways of doing things in the business, right? That is why they try to say that let's having all these standardized process before you put them into the system. So the results, you can have a look at the result that a lot of these rules, business rule in the operations are mapped as many gateways. I think Arash have a very good slide where we have multitude of gateways in process models, pretty much making everything very complicated. So the result can be grouped into two potential scenarios. The first part is if the IT project has some sort of process engines or BPMS in the background, yes, that is good because you can start doing execution on them. But the issue is that the business rules are now being represented as a lot of gateways, making all the whole process, the standardizations very complex and complicated. Now, the second scenario is that there might be no process engine or the process engine is not used as a process engine. So at the end, a lot of these rules are then hard-coded in the codes of the application. So this is the worst case scenario. And believe me or not, there's still a lot of IT projects, software development, heavily relying on coding. So that second scenario is still very common, where all these business rules that you capture as gateway end up in hard-coded lines in your software. Back to you, Arash and Golly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Max, just to kind of summarize about what you mentioned. So, essentially, organizations to deal with these sources of the change from the process point of view, they have two approaches. Well, essentially, they go to organizations, they do process mapping, they capture the process to understand how organization works. That's one side of it. And then if they use any process engine to execute those mapped processes, they use that to automate part of those process execution. Now, the problem is when things change, if you have done only the process mapping and then the execution of that process relies either on the systems that build, essentially building system also relies on IT to do the software development or readjustment and change the enterprise off-the-shelf solutions like ERP, CRM, or for example, loan origination system they have, but still it's the IT task. So these changes the I will be pushing to organizations. Then we use the process mapping to identify the impact of that change and the location of that change, and then the work goes back to IT to adapt and adjust those changes into either a new system they need to build or the existing system that they need to change the rules and decision within those systems, or to readjust and redeploy and reconfigure the existing enterprise system like CRM that they have, or for example, loan origination system or ERP system that they have. So that's one part of it, which is purely based on IT doing the job. And then the problem also becomes if they have used a form of process engine that executes part of that process, more often than not, what you see is that those decision points in the process, they actually are responsible for making that decision rather than just being a gateway to route a specific case to the part of the process. And that's, I think, it's a interesting point in time that I ask you, Max. So where do you see this confusion come from? That confusing that routing in the process to the actual decision making inside the process.
Yes, yeah, I look at this diagram, you have seen that there are a lot of gateways and everyone is using the gateways, and everyone talk about the gateway as it is the decision point or they are the decision points. But before we dive into that, I think let's take a step back to what just Arash just mentioned, is that change is pretty much inevitable in today's business worlds. There are so many changes externally or internal environments. They keep on changing. Your CEO changed, they have a new policies, more policies, so make more changes, like changes forever. If you're working in the industry, you can see that every 3 months there are new changes. 3 months might be too long a term. It could be even shorter. So the business agility, I think going back to the original idea of the whole business agility or the decision agility is when all these changes is happening, you want the business operation to very quickly able to get on with the changes so that they can respond very fast and be able to cope with all these changes. So going back to the original two scenarios that we have talked about, the first one is hard-coded rules inside the IP applications or configured in the applications. Trust me, in many cases, you can't even find where are these rules being coded or configured, not to mention to modify it. Being able to change them, you need to be able to identify them and locate them first. So this is many challenges when there are changes happening. And also the gateways rules, as I mentioned, looking at this diagram, is if you go and change these gateways, you are pretty much changing the whole processes. You need to redeploy the whole processes again onto the platform. So going back to Arash's question, why is this happening? So gateway is used as decision point. This is pretty much an inherited knowledge that we have learned from the past, because I believe everyone before we learn BPMN will have come across in our life using flowchart to do process mapping or workflow mapping. So because in flowchart, the gateway we have been learned that the gateway that not the gateway is the diamond shape represent a decision point where you make the decision, where the person make a decision or the system make a decision. But in BPMN, the case is a bit different, because in BPMN the gateway is not a decision point, it's a routing mechanism. So it routes the result from a previous task and take the result from the previous task and route it accordingly. So in BPMN, the gateway is like a road junction. So I was talking to Arash about this the other day, is if you drive your car along a road and it reaches a junction, the road junction itself, it does not determine where the car is going to go, because it's just a road junction. It's just like a junction on the map. So it is you who are the driver who is going to decide and determine where the car is going. Well, are you going to turn left, turn right, or go straight if it is a simple junction? So treat the gateway in a process map like a road junction. It doesn't make decision for you. You as the driver need to make the decision. It means that in your process model, you need to do something to take those decisions out of the process model itself, so that the process model, the decision point is, or the business rule, I take it back. The business rules within the decision task is independent of the process map itself. Yep. That
Absolutely.
we will jump to that later on. Back to you, Arash.
No, absolutely. And then you mentioned actually interesting point, because it's not always the business rule though. So those gateways that we see on the screen, essentially in this particular instance, are used to actually take that decision. Now, if you imagine we remove all of that and we simplify it, and I'm going to show you a simplified version of this later on in this discussion. But essentially, those decisions may not necessarily be always rule driven, although most of the time they are. Hence, regulation impacts them heavily. But also, you might think as a decision a decision task or rule task, as Max knows better than me. So before one of those diamonds, so you can have a task execution that executes a decision for you and returns the outcome of that decision into the context of your process model. Now, those decisions, it might be rule driven, which is most of the time are. It might also involve a form and shape of predictive analytics or machine learning, for example, for rating of the customer or the probability of this customer will default a credit or loan, or for example, calculating the propensity of a customer to accept an offer. All of them are involved, not only the rules, but also some other more advanced capability like machine learning, predictive analytics, and so on. So that decision encapsulate all of that and gives you the outcome of the decision. That decision task gives you the outcome of the decision execution. Now, at that point, you can decide which route you go based on the outcome of already made decision, already executed decision. Now, that takes me to the other point that if you want to change this process, or if you want to change a custom built software, everyone in the organization have their own interpretation, understanding from agile and all of that. But if we focus on the agile methodology in software development, what we're going to see is it was evolved from longer than what we know agile for. For example, initial version of agile methodology, XP, extreme programming from Ken Beck, and all of those fun principle of how to build a good software. And the history behind that is it wasn't incremental process. So we did the requirement gathering, we did the software design, we did the implementation. All of a sudden, 5 years into the project, and we haven't delivered any value. And software agile methodology come into the picture saying, look, break down the value you want to deliver those values incrementally, put the tests in place, make sure you can refactor the software as we go through different stages of the improvement and delivery. And that's the core of the agile methodology. Now, nowadays, we can see across many different segments and industries that agile methodology sold as not only part of the solving the software development problem, but also part of the larger agility to organization, which is an oversell for agile methodology, because the tooling that exists at this point of time inside the IT cannot deal with the frequency and amount and deep impact of the business rules and events that coming out of those sources of the change. Even breaking down a big project into smaller and delivered incremental, if you put the context, if you remember the context we shared, the amount of changes coming out of everywhere, internal and external, is just too much to deal with that, either with software development, pro code or low code or no code, whatever you want to do based on your organization's capacity. That is not going to cut through and gives organization as a whole the decision agility they need to respond to all of these changes at the right time with the right quality and within the budget they expect. And based on the conversation we had with Max, he mentioned the very interesting keyword, and he just passed on this, and I'm going to put Max in the hot seat. So Max, you mentioned in the word of standardization. So can you explore that for us for a little more details? Because based on my understanding and my involvement with many organizations, one of the reasons behind doing this process mapping and trying to automate these processes is essentially standardization. So take us through that mindset.
Yes, I think that is a very important changes, because fundamentally you need to change how process modeling is done. So going back to the one of the key objectives of process mapping is to helping organizations to standardize their process, because the ultimate aim of an organization, like any other place or any other business, is trying to manage the cost of the operations. So one way to reduce the cost of the operation, of course, is trying to make the operations, which are a lot of processes, running in a very efficient way. And the bottom line of running them in a very efficient way is standardize them, make them everything running in a similar way, or as I said, apart from the required variations, you're trying to make them into standardized process as much as possible. So that is pretty much the driver behind it, to make your operations as efficient as possible. So you, on one hand, you have that drive for efficiency and standardization to achieve that efficiency. But on the other hand, because I think 10 years ago, you might not have that changes. You can put in an ERP system, you can build your hard code your system. After 10 years, it's still running perfectly, meeting all your business requirements, because there isn't any changes over that time, or very hardly significant changes. But in modern days, entrepreneurial businesses, you will see that there are so many destructive changes happening outside the business environments, and internally you need to cope with all the changes as well. I think going through the COVID-19 phases and up to today's business world, it can be obvious that changes is happening very, very quickly external to an environment. So fundamentally, every business is trying to balance that. On one hand, trying to achieve the efficiency through standardization. On the other hand, trying to maintain that high responsiveness to the changes. So this is where the biggest challenge in a lot of business process improvement is, because on one hand, if you keep on doing process standardization without considering the responsiveness of the business, you're going to make the business very rigid and hard to respond to the external changes. And not only that, it's going to become very costly, because once you touch on IT application, trying to make changes to them, it is a question of millions and millions of dollars to make those changes. So these are the key part of the challenges. So the fundamental change is from process improvement or process management point of view, is to be able to take out the decision points and make them independent to your standardized process. Because once you take those gateway out to become represent them in BPMN term, is using what is called a business rule task. I know that is still referred to business rule, and Araj think that is more than business rule. Just keep with the term, because BPMN call it business rules. It's the business rule task process model to represent all these activities that is making decisions. So it's the decision making activities is represented as a business rule task. So the actual decision making is a single activity box inside your process model. The decision making is then represented, or the logic behind it is represented using a separate decision model that is independent, used but independent from the process model itself. So in that case, you can standardize as much as possible with your processes. For example, you have 3 potential variants or 3 potential flows in your process after the gateway, but the determination of which path to follow is not within the gateway, but a decision model that is being called or being used prior to that gateway. So you will pass all the required information or data to the decision models, and the decision model and come back and say that, yes, take route number 1, or no, take route number 3. So the gateway will just perform that accordingly and say, yes, this requires me to take route number 1. So in that case, your rules are now independent of the processes. So you can make changes to the decision model or the rules within the decision model, or whatever you want to call them in the decision model, without affecting your process model, because your process model still have the 3 required variations that you have, which you have standardized in your business to run your business operations. So the rules that is now sitting in the decision logic in the decision model will determine the outcome of based on the data received. Remember, this is data driven not guesstimate, works on what path the process model need to take. So that will be used back in the process model to do the job. I hope that actually give a clear picture of what is happening.
Okay, look, the point is we do the process mapping for standardization, and it is important because we want to have standardized process for efficiency, and then we want to adjust or have answers for the exceptions and variations in different situations. Now, if we focus on all of that from the process point of view, that's the problem we will face. So we cannot necessarily standardize all of it through the process. What is the alternative? Well, not necessarily the alternative. What is the complement approach to this process model? So we talk a little bit about standardization, and then that was the standardization for the processes. Now, what comes out of this discussion is there is another level of standardization which is outside of the scope of process modeling. So that is standardization for the decisions that you need to make and how you make those decisions. And then outcome of those decisions will be serving to the diamond shape gateway in your BPMN because they're not supposed to make decisions, they're just routing. Now, outcome of the decisions goes to that and it takes through the rest of the process. Now, what we're going to talk about here now is I want to introduce something you may not have heard, or if you did, it's good to reiterate on this concept. So, Max, you want
just a quick interruption for those that have learned about BPMN. That's why the acronym looks very similar, BPMN and DMN, because they're actually siblings. They come from the same parent, come from the same source. So one is BPMN for the process modeling, and the other one is DMN for the decision modeling. Back to you, Arash.
Yes. So decision modeling comes from organization OMG. If you don't know about it, that's not a big deal. But essentially, it's a standardized, open standard, vendor agnostic notation and language for business decisions and business rules. Now, the very, very cool thing about DMN is it's not just the standardized notation. It's actually have multiple different conformance level, which allows you to execute those decision model that you create. Now, what we're going to talk about now is a couple of high-level components about the decision model, and I want to show you very quickly a process model that is simplified by using those decision models, and then we're going to come back to the presentation again. Now, decision model and notation, DMN, has a couple of components, what's for the lack of word, to it. So if you look at the DMN as the core of decision model and notation as the concept, there are a couple of components to it. So the first one is how you conceptually, at the high level, model a decision-making scenario. That is called decisions requirement diagram. It looks like what you see on the screen. It is a graph that allows you to define different requirements for the diagram, for the decision making from your business knowledge, input data, sub decisions, and documentation. A very high level model that does not deep go into the details of how the decisions are made. Now, every single box in this particular graph has its own meaning and its own reasons behind it. Now, the first step is building the decisions requirement diagram for that decision-making scenario. Now, if we do that, then one of the very popular way of modeling business decisions is the decision table. Now, the decision table is a tabular form, allows you to build business rules in a very friendly, easy way to understand. It very much looks like Excel. If you know Excel and work with Excel, you can become the decision table mastermind. Now, so you build your decision requirements diagram, you build your rules within the decision table. There are, remember I said we have a language for execution. So there are some form of expressing specification of some rules as well. So that's not the only way you can specify rules. Similar to Excel, you have functions in Excel that does very good things and funny stuff in Excel. You can play with it. DMN also introduces an expression language called FEEL, which is acronym for Friendly Enough Expression Language, which is actually very friendly enough expression language for non-technical people. It's very easier than formulas in Excel. Now, what you see on the screen is how you express, for example, a product type based on some based on, for example, some values that you pass in for the product type, whether that's standard or special loan. And then from the DMN, because you might use all of these expression in your decision making, you need to kind of wrap it and make it reusable and modular into your project across many different decision tables or decision requirements diagram you build. And hence, the next one is called box expression. Box expression is a way that you wrap your expression that you build around different form of box expression we have, but essentially what it does is it makes your expressions reusable. So, Max, do you want to add something, or shall?
Yeah, if you can go back to tools on the table, then I might be able to add some comments there to help a lot of people understand. I think it's 2 slides back on the decision table.
Decision table.
Yes, yes. I think if you look at the decision table, it's very easy to use because each of the line is a rule, is one of the rules that you capture as an if and then statement. So the first line, each row is each row is an if and then statement. So if and if that, then so the yellow column, the last column, the gear is then this is the output. So if you think in that way, you'll be easily able to do that. And one of the key part of a decision table, the decision logic table in DMN is that this is not tools agnostic, unfortunately, but most of the tools will allow you to find gaps. For example, when you set up all the rules, it will be able to tell you that have you covered all the potential combination or permutation available. That is very, very critical because a lot of the time when we write rules, we miss it and having gaps. And when you actually put them into codes, you have things falling through the cracks. That's when bad things happens because the rules does not cover all the possible permutation of the combination of the conditions. So that is one of the, I would say, advantage of using a good DMN modeling tools.
So this platform is Flex Rule Designer. We are conformance level 3 with DMN. But essentially what I'm showing you here is a process model. And you can see here that we have some gateways that we talked about. This is the simplified version of that big process that you saw on the screen. And if you do proper process standardization and decision standardization, that big picture of big spaghetti that you couldn't find your way out becomes something very manageable and easy to understand, like what you see on the screen. Now, the point here, the critical points of the decision making, this is just for the setting of the context. This is a pre-approval for loan origination application. When you want to get a loan, they have to say, yes, we agree in principle and we will work on your application, or no, sorry, we can't offer you a loan, right? Now, in these particular cases, there are certain decisions that are very complex. And if you want to embed them inside your process or applications or systems or loan origination off-the-shelf products, it's going to be very hard to adjust and adapt to the required changes that you have down the track. Now, the point of this process is you can see, if we look at this part for now, this particular box is the business rule task, as Max mentioned. It executes a decision, and based on that, it sends the result to the gateway, and gateway looks at the outcome of the decision. Based on those outcome of the decision, routes the case to different path of the process. Now, if we drill down to this particular path, what you're going to see, I zoom in, is a decision requirement diagram. Now, this particular decision works out what is the next best outcome for this applicant. Do we carry on with the application and we continue the process, or do we reject the application? Now, you can see in a decision requirement diagram, if you look at the model, this graphical diagram representation of the decision we want to make from the top to bottom, that works out based on dependency. So the decision, the outcome of the decision depends on two other decisions, eligibility and bureau type. If you look at, for example, bureau type depends on the pre-risk category. And if you look at the pre-risk category, it depends on application risk score. Mm-hmm. The benefit of this is at the very high level, you define how do you make a decision without involving in any details of the rules and data you need and attributes you need to work out. Now you can drill down to any of these boxes. Let's drill down to this. And what you're gonna see is the rules model around that specific decision that you wanted to make. Now, as Max mentioned, this is the decision table, which allows you to model business rules. If you look at one row, the green columns are conditions or input. The pink column is outcome or action. So this one says, when age is between 36 and 49, then application risk score is 43. Or for example, this particular rule says, if the marital status is M, meaning they're married, and then the application score is 45, and so on and so forth. And if there are conditions, for example, we can say, if the age is greater than 61, and it combines another condition. So if age greater or equal to 61 and marital status is single, then application risk score is 25. So you can see very formally and structurally, you can build your rules around that particular decision, which if we go back to the context of that, it was the rules around application risk score. By the way, there are many details that we are skipping. For example, decision table has hit policy, can have aggregation function, all of those technical details. But for the sake of this conversation, what we want to show that standardization doesn't need to be only happening inside your processes. So whether that is a process engine or pushes the change to IT and building those rules and decisions inside IT systems. If you standardize the way you make decisions using DMN, decision model and notation, when change happens, your life will be much more easier because you just go to this model. Let's, for example, that I just added, for example, another new rule. And then with adding that, all the systems and processes and your CRM, your loan origination system, they will use the single source of truth, how that particular decision is made and executed. So this change and also will propagate to all of those systems, but also you have control over when does it propagate, how does it do it, what system can use this, and what version of this is active. So there are so many governance also around this that you can also manage through platform. Max, do you want to add something here?
I think you've gone through in quite details, and if you dive even deeper, it will be more confusing for a lot of audience. I think that would be probably much that. Maybe maybe I can talk later on about a little bit about the data analytic part that Gauri's.
Yeah. So the question was when AI and data analytics and machine learning can come into the picture. So the decisions requirement diagram you see on the picture. Now this decision requirement diagram has these boxes. So these boxes are decision in the DMN. Now, decisions can be rule driven, can be predictive analytics driven, can be machine learning driven, can be data driven. So, the benefit of using decisions requirement diagram is, let's say you have a risk category which is determined by a predictive model or a machine learning model. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just add this box here and we say risk determine. Now, this risk determination can be linked now to your machine learning model. So if I look at this in my box, and you can look at, if I highlight this, you can look at this and you can see, you can link this particular node of decision graph to a predictive model. Now, this predictive model can be based on your predictive algorithm that you built, like PMML or ONNX from neural network of machine learning, or it can be simply data aggregation and you do all of those data on the fly. The point here being, to answer the question, a decision requirement diagram is very flexible that allows you to integrate machine learning, data analytics, or predictive analytics inside that decision-making process. I hope that answers. Max, do you want to add something regarding this?
I think I can add something to that as well. This again, it goes back to the if you have very powerful tools like what Araj just showed you, that it will be possible to do that, to have your data analytics in the background doing that. But apart from that, I have seen in places where data analytics is used to extract rules, so it's sort of indirectly. So, for example, if you using your data analytics, you identify that the weather pattern is actually affecting how your business is performing in certain areas, you might be able to formulate your business rules on how you want to work out at your operation levels. So that will be a sort of a more, I would say that, not more indirect ways. So using that data analytics to do the core relationship, identify the conditions, and then you build out your rules using the data, using the decision model rules, so that your source is using the data analytics as a way to identify what are the key conditions you want to use in your decision making, but using the DMN modeling as a way to model that out, because the difference between applying the analytics itself directly as a decision is, one is you're taking things out and make it something that is visible in your reasoning, because one of the key things, the difference between the analytics side and the decision modeling, the DMN side, is DMN side has a very clear reasoning evidence behind it. So that is a again, go ahead. It's a decision that the business need to make. Are you going to use the analytics purely out of the box, or you want to use it to extract rules and apply it? So that is a separate type of question. I would say the more strategic level question to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as I showed on the screen, based on what Max mentioned, you have the rule mining capability that you can use and mine your data for rules and understand those criteria. Because we are going out of time, I just want to share this one slide quickly. So, what we want to offer for all of the people attended here now, we want to help everyone that attended to this webinar to get started with DMN. So if you go to flexrule.com/DMN/start, you can see the page that it is in front of you. Put your information in and we will be in touch with you to help you to get up and running with standardization of decision making in your organization. Where to start, how to start, what's the best first step, what do you need to learn, who do you need to train in your organizations, and all of those questions. We will be able to answer that for you.
Mike's question is that what is the best practice for using DMN alongside BP and BPMN?
The best practice is when you reach a point of a gateway, always have a business rule task or a decision task before that gateway. If you don't know how to do the DMN at this point in time, don't worry about that. But have a good practice to say that before the gateway, you always have a task that is actually the decision-making task. Indeed, BPMN is called business rule task. But when I talk to the business, a lot of time I just tell them that is your decision task. The decision is made within that task, not the gateway. So have that as a practice. Always do that. Then you start learning how to do your decision modeling on the other side to complement that decision task. That is it. Because with the decision task, you can, a lot of the time, you might be able to resolve your 10 gateways into a single gateway.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. All right.
Excellent. I think
Back to you.
we're out of time.
Yeah, just 1 minute left.
Okay, so the moral of the story is start using decision tasks, or as Max says, rule tasks before your decision point. Integrate decision model and notation. That's a open standard vendor neutral notation and language for decision making, and your life becomes much more easier. And then you can use decision model notation with conformance level 3 to not only standardize those decisions, how the decision are made, but also execute those decisions, return the result back to your processes. You can integrate them inside your application. So however you want, that makes a better way of how you want to manage your rules and decisions within your processes and within your applications. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Go to flexrule.com/dmn/start, and we will be in touch to help you get started for your decision modeling and notation journey.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, Arash.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, Goli.
I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation as much.
Thank you, Goli and Arash.